ਪੰਜਾਬ ਟੀਵੀ ਦੇ ਸਾਰੇ ਦਰਸ਼ਕਾਂ ਦਾ ਮੈਂ ਜਸਬੀਰ ਪੋਗਲ ਇੱਕ ਵਾਰੀ ਫਿਰ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਇਲੈਕਸ਼ਨ ਸਪੈਸ਼ਲ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਕਰਦਾ। ਅੱਜ ਦੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਅਸੀਂ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ ਐਂਡਰੂ ਸਮਿਥ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ, ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਿ ਨੇ ਲੈਜੀਮੋਡੀਏ ਕਨਸਟੀਟੂਐਂਸੀ ਤੋਂ ਪੀਸੀ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਦੇ ਉਮੀਦਵਾਰ। Welcome to the studio, Andrew.
Well, thank you. Honored to be here.
We are honored to have you here. First of all, congratulations on the new one that you had.
Well, thank you. Yes, I have a little 6-month-old baby at home. His
Yeah.
name's Lincoln, and very proud to be a new dad. It's my first child, and my wife and I are so blessed to have a healthy young baby. So, baby boy.
So did you know when you had that baby that you're going to be entangled into 2 jobs now? Because elections were called in early, a year before than they were supposed to.
Of course, I know the premier announced the election after my son was born, so we didn't know that we'd be having a 6-month-old during an election campaign.
So 2 jobs now, eh?
2 jobs,
Full-time.
exactly. But you know what? It's worth every minute of it. Worth every minute.
Of course it is. I being a parent myself can vouch for that. Okay, so we're talking about elections being called early.
Right.
And then again, there was this PST cut of 1%.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people think that was just a candy in the pocket of the voters, the 1% cut, and then the calling of the elections early, before, much before they were scheduled for.
Right.
So, are these things connected to each other? Like PST cut along with the calling of the elections earlier than they were supposed to.
Well, the PST, we promised in our first term we're going to reduce by 1 percentage point, and that's what we did. The Premier has been clear that the election was held earlier because next year is Manitoba's 150th anniversary, and he doesn't want to confuse, of course, the anniversary of Manitoba with the election. He doesn't want to turn it to a partisan issue, so that's why he made it clear publicly why he wants to have an election now rather than in next year in 2020.
Okay, so let's go to the burning issue of the time.
Sure.
Closing of the emergency rooms.
Right.
So what went behind that? What was the thinking of the Palliser government behind closing of the ERs and opening urgent care units instead?
Well, we're going on a study that was done by Dr. Peachy. It's called the Peachy Report, and I'm sure you're very familiar with it. The Peachy Report actually was commissioned in 2015, I believe it was, under the former NDP government. And so when we came to power, we saw it, and we came to government, we saw that, and we acted on the recommendations based on Dr. Peachy. So Dr. Peachy's modeled it after some other places. Edmonton is one city that has been referenced, and Vancouver as well, where you have fewer emergency rooms and less wait time. So it's more about consolidation, consolidating services in the emergency rooms, the 3 major ones, rather than spread across the city.
Would you go into a little bit of details of what were the reasons behind it, and then what was the outcome that you were expecting from this structure?
Well, of course, restructuring is never easy. Change isn't easy. We all know that. Right? So we know that it's still a process, and we believe that as time goes on, the process will work itself out and be a much improved system than it was prior. I don't think anybody would suggest that what was going on prior to the changes was sustainable. I know when I was door knocking in 2016 and talking to folks and talking to citizens in my own constituency, no one was happy with the way the healthcare system was set up then. So something had to be done, and of course we're acting on expert advice, Dr. Peachy being that expert.
But then again, there were layoffs for the nurses as well. Now, wouldn't it happen better that you had increased the workforce into the health system rather than cutting down on the ERs?
Well, the truth is we are hiring more nurses, always looking for more nurses. The truth of the matter is it's a restructuring of the system. So again, consolidating services into the major emergency rooms rather than spread across the city. I know that some nurses had been moved from hospital to hospital. That's one thing. We know that that's not necessarily an easy thing to adapt to. At the end of the day, though, we are concerned about making sure that
there's been reports that they are overworked.
Well, yeah, good. Again, of course, with a system the size of the healthcare system we have, there's no question it's not an easy adjustment, and we thank healthcare providers, right from doctors, nurses, and everyone in between. Thank them for the services they do, and understand that it's not always easy. No change is easy. I think you and I probably find change difficult in our lives. But at the end of the day, we do want to make sure that the system works for Manitobans and works for the patient and patient care. So that's ultimately the goal for the whole change. And again, like I said, this report by Dr. Peachy was commissioned under the previous NDP government, dating back a good year before we even got elected.
So you mean to say they have to buy their own bullet?
Well, you said that, of course. But, look, if it was commissioned by the previous government, I mean, obviously there's some merit to it, right? Two different parties agreed that it worked, or it was a good idea, and we're the ones who moved ahead with it. And we believed it was the right thing to do.
Okay. So we talked about the PST cut of 1%. Right. Experts say that it's going to result into a deficit of about $325 million in the future. Mm-hmm. So what is PC government's planning as to that if they come back into the power? What will they do to offset that deficit?
Right. Well, I mean, let's face it, the Premier and our Cabinet have been very diligent in making sure that public money is spent wisely in government, and we've done restructuring right across government. I mean, healthcare is one example, but it's happened in other departments as well, making sure that every dollar spent is a dollar spent wisely, right? If just spending more money, like it was in the past, was a solution to problems, well, of course, something like the healthcare system would never have been an issue in the first place. So we don't believe just spending more money, of course, fixes problems, but we know that the Premier and Cabinet have been planning years out, and they certainly have anticipated the changes with the PST reduction, and know that kind of cash flow they'll have going forward.
We started with the healthcare thing, and there's another issue that is related to primarily to healthcare. Mm-hmm. That is the issue with the cutting down of the medical facilities for the foreign students. Mm-hmm. They used to have free medical, I think a year ago or something like that. But now they don't. Now they have to look into the group insurance plans with their colleges. They have to pay more on the top of their fees. Their fees are already about, I think, 3 times the regular fees. Right. So they have to pay for the accommodation. They have to pay extra fee, and of course they have to survive as well. That they have other expenditures as well. And if they have to pay insurance premiums on top of everything, isn't that difficult for them? Or what was the reason behind this cut?
Well, again, I mean, we are trying to make the healthcare system in general, and of course our whole province is sustainable financially and in other ways as well. And of course, having a healthcare system that works for all Manitobans is our top priority. And we know that we have to make some choices, and some choices are easier than others, right? And let's be honest that the healthcare system, we want to make sure that it's available for us, not only just years from now, but for our children. My newborn son can, when he's my age, can still benefit from the same healthcare system, and we have to think a few years out.
So when they look for this group insurance thing, they might be looking for some private carriers and stuff, private insurance companies. Wouldn't it have been wiser to make them pay maybe a minimal premium to some government agency or Manitoba Health per se, so they would also pay as to that for the services and stuff, but they will pay minimally, and that money also goes into the pocket of the government. Right.
Well, again, I mean, that's a possibility, I guess, but at this point, I mean, I don't know what the future is going to hold with respect to the international students on the healthcare issue. But again, healthcare, we want to make sure that it's sustainable and available to all Manitobans, and want to make sure that we're able to keep it sustainable going for years on end.
Okay, let's talk about privatization. Okay, so Palestine government has been in favor of privatization, I think, always. MPI and Manitoba Liquor and Lottery, there are talks that they will be privatized once the Palestine government comes back into the power. So is this something really going to happen, or is it just talks?
Well, of course, that came from the NDP. So remember when the NDP, of course, makes a claim like that, there's some political reasons behind it. I mean, that's certainly not being talked at our end of the spectrum here. We're concerned, of course, about making sure that MPI is responsible to the ratepayer. And we've been working very hard to do that over the last 3.5 years, and continue to do so.
MPI has been profitable, right? So.
Right. But I mean, at the end of the day, like I said, we want to make sure that it is working in the best interest of all Manitobans, and certainly for the ratepayer, because we know that it's the ratepayer is that also the taxpayer here in the province, and we want to make sure that that is being they're being respected.
Well, we had a talk about this with other candidates as well, and they pointed out that we are already paying the cheapest premiums so far as the MPI premiums are concerned as compared to the other provinces. So why to mend which is not broken?
Well, again, I mean, like I said, that is more of an NDP talking point, I find, than a talking point from our end, right? Okay. I mean, the NDP can make accusations as they want. They've talked about the myth of cuts, which aren't true. We've restructured government in many ways, but not making cuts as trimming at the top is something the Premier's talked about and something's acted on. But there's no, the myth of cuts is just what it sounds like, myth of cuts.
So there's nothing tangible happening towards privatization of MPI and Manitoba Liquor Lottery?
Like I said, we're trying to make sure that, first of all, that they're sustainable going forward, and that they act in the best interest of of every Manitoban and the ratepayer.
Okay. Yeah, of course. That's the job of the government to act in the
Exactly.
best interest of the people.
Right.
And there could also be plannings, and then there could also be failures, and of course it's all part of the planning process and the long-term planning that we should be looking at. But then again, the long-term planning of a lot of the other parties that was cut short by the earlier calling of the election, so they had to resort to the short-term planning instead of the long-term that they were going with.
Right.
So it was a big political decision, I would say. But do you think it will work in the benefit of PC, or will it work against it?
Well, we're a democracy, right? And we know that the people get to choose at election time, and that's exactly what they're going to do. They did the same thing in 2016. And all we can do is, and I humbly ask for, in my community, to ask my constituents to vote for me, and of course vote for my colleagues in the other ridings across this province.
Alright, let's go on to education.
Sure.
So there's a K-12 review that's been going on for
Yeah.
amalgamating school divisions all over Winnipeg into one, I suppose, one or two.
Well, I mean, I don't know what the actual outcome's going to be. We let the committee decide what's going to happen with that review.
So what do you think will be the benefit of amalgamating all the school divisions?
Well, first of all, I mean, the review, it's been a long time since we had a review.
Mm-hmm.
I think, it's reasonable to say that, you should go with some progress report as you go along in any department, and education should be no exception. So we're going to eagerly await the outcome of the review and act on recommendations as they come from that committee.
What is the intention of PC Party going into the review? So do they have something in mind about the outcome of the review? If the review says that you guys don't need amalgamation, so would they stick to that review, or would they want to still go ahead with the amalgamation?
Well, it's my understanding they're going to certainly take the outcome of that committee review seriously, and how they implement. I mean, that'd be up to the Minister of the Education, whoever that is, after election, and if we are elected as government, and I hope we are. But we would certainly take the review seriously. I mean, otherwise, why would we have commissioned it, right? We do take it seriously, and we will look forward to the outcome of that very important review.
Okay, let's go further into the education part. Okay. So there was a cap on the university fee earlier, which was removed, and the university fees are now increasing at the rate of at an average of about 5% every year, which is making it difficult for new students to get in. Was there any motive behind this so far as the financial aspect of it was concerned?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, Manitoba is one of the lowest tuitions in the country here, which is very nice. I graduated from the University of Manitoba. My wife graduated from the University of Manitoba, and it's a great university. We have a lot of very educated workforce here in the province. And hey, look, at the end of the day, we also know that to operate a university, you need the finances to do it, right? And I think, given the fact that we have one of the lowest tuitions in the province, or in the country rather, I think Manitoba students are in a good position.
Okay, so you mean to say that the increase of the fees is conducive for the university to run effectively?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, they have the freedom to do that, right? But we.
But was there also a cut in the funding of the universities as well?
Well, again, like University of Manitoba and most universities, tuition in Manitoba is some of the lowest in the country, right? So to say that I think students have a very good opportunity here in this province. There's no question, right? A lot of opportunity to go to get educated at a very good and decent price. And we've got some great universities, University of Brandon, University of Manitoba, University of Winnipeg, just to name a few, that pump out some very successful graduates and who go on to do great things here in Manitoba and around the world. So, I think that this is a great province, and I think universities here have done a great job and are continuing to do a great job here to create some important and very successful graduates.
All right, Andrew.
Yeah.
We'll talk some more after this break.
Sounds good. Thank you.
ਹੁਣ ਵੇਲਾ ਜੀ ਇੱਕ ਬ੍ਰੇਕ ਦਾ, ਮਿਲਦੇ ਆ ਇਸ ਛੋਟੇ ਜਿਹੇ ਬ੍ਰੇਕ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ। ਬ੍ਰੇਕ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਸਾਰੇ ਦਰਸ਼ਕਾਂ ਦਾ ਇੱਕ ਵਾਰ ਫੇਰ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਹੈ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਇਲੈਕਸ਼ਨ ਸਪੈਸ਼ਲ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ। ਅੱਜ ਅਸੀਂ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ ਐਂਡਰੂ ਸਮਿਥ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ, ਜਿਹੜੇ ਨੇ ਲੈਜੀਮੋਡੀਏ ਕਨਸਟੀਟੂਐਂਸੀ ਤੋਂ ਪੀਸੀ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਦੇ ਉਮੀਦਵਾਰ। So Andrew, before going to the break, we were talking about the education. We talked about the removal of the cap on the university fees, which allowed them to increase the fee every year. But there was also a very contradictory scenario when we talk about the Crown Corporation employees' wages. So a cap has been put on those wages. The wages have been frozen from increase. So what do you say about that?
Well, we've been clear from early on in our mandate. We've had a number of cost-saving measures here across government, and that's one of them. We want to make sure that the government of Manitoba lives within its means, because at the end of the day, there's only one taxpayer, and Manitobans are the taxpayer. And we want to make sure that that dollar is respected, while respecting, of course, the good people who work in the civil service. And my wife, for example, works in the civil service herself. I've got a lot of friends in the civil service, and I know that we rely heavily on the services from our provincial government. And we also want to make sure we respect the taxpayer, the hardworking taxpayer who funds those very services.
But will the inflation obey to that freeze? Inflation is always going to be there. It's going to rise every year. Right. But if there's a freeze on the wages, how are the workers going to cope with the inflation?
Well, let's be honest here. When we formed government, we had a very large deficit. And if nothing had been changed, the deficit would be close to $1.8 billion by the end of our first term, right? We've reduced it substantially. We've got to make sure that we have a sustainable financial future in the province of Manitoba. Just the debt servicing cost on the debt alone are $1 billion, or almost $1 billion a year. That's big, $1 billion. I mean, how much more can we invest in our province with that extra money, right? So we do have to be careful. I mean, just any household in Manitoba, Manitobans know they've got to live within their means. They've got to make sure that they have enough money at the end of the month and to put some away for savings. The government should be no different than the Manitoba taxpayer and the hardworking families here that live within their means.
So you mean to say, should we expect more job cuts if PC came into power again?
Well, I mean, again, like I said, the myth of cuts is just what it sounds like. It's a myth. There's been a lot of changes and structural changes for sure, but that's a myth of cuts that have been perpetuated by our opposition, and I guess that's their job, is to do that. But at the end of the day, we believe it's a myth of cuts. There is no cuts.
But it's just the PC party is coming out as a party of cuts. You're cutting jobs, cutting funding, and then putting on freezes. So is this the only way the PC party could think of generating income or saving some money, just cutting jobs and cutting funding and stuff?
Well, we've been very clear. Like I said, it's a myth of cuts that's been perpetuated against us, and we have inherited a financial mess. And I don't think anyone, I mean, I was knocking on doors in 2016 and even now, and there's people from who had supported other parties in the past had said the same thing. No, we get it. You inherited a mess. So we're making difficult decisions to try and keep our spending under control. And of course, we've done a very good job of that, while making sure that we can maintain the services that Manitobans rely on a daily basis.
Okay, let's go on to environment now.
Okay.
So a lot of parties, they're very serious into global warming
Right.
and other environmental issues, but some parties are in complete denial of the thing. Where do you stand?
Well, I mean, look, our government has a green plan.
Mhm.
We've seen it, right? And very proud of the green plan. We were very disappointed that the federal government did not accept our green plan, and they wanted to go to their backstop and introduce a carbon tax, a federal carbon tax, a Trudeau carbon tax.
Mhm.
We don't support that. We believe that Manitoba is a green province, right? We have green energy that we produce. We're not putting out the kind of pollutants and carbon emissions that other provinces are, and we think we should get credit for it. And we don't believe that the federal government's plan includes or certainly accommodates a green province like Manitoba.
Would you share some features of that green plan with our viewers?
Well, of course, one of them, and the major component is the $102 million trust fund, the green trust fund. And so that's used for any kind of environmental cleanup and of course wetland restoration and any kind of green type of activities that we need to do in the province. I know in fact in Save Our Seine, got $100,000 from our province for provincial government, I want to say back in March, if I'm not mistaken, for cleanup around the Seine River and anything that they need to do to beautify the area and improve its overall quality. So we do have money set aside for it. It's a trust. It's great. The one thing is we did have an issue with the federal government, and we did not believe that the federal government was being fair to Manitoba because Manitoba is a green province. We have green energy, and we don't believe that their backstop was accommodating to green provinces like Manitoba.
So what would this green plan cost Manitobans?
Well, I mean, of course, the $102 million green trust, which is great. And of course, going forward, I mean, depending on what kind of needs arise, but at this point, a major component is the $100 million.
There going to be some other taxes put on the Manitobans?
Well, we actually introduced our own version of a carbon pricing strategy, as you know, right? And ours was, $10 per ton, metric ton, and it was flat, like the Prairie Horizon, right? It did not move. It was flat. It was dependable, and everyone knew, businesses and families could plan around it. The federal plan started off at a much lower rate and ended up at $50 per ton. We thought that's not acceptable. We were willing to implement the $10 per ton fee, and the federal government didn't go with it, so now we're going to oppose that and say no. We're not going to allow the federal government to take money out of Manitoba, which is already being a green province, and send it to Ottawa. That's just not something that we believe Manitobans or is in the best interest of our province.
Alrighty. There are a couple of serious issues that's been going on with Manitoba right now, and they're increasing day by day.
Okay.
Number one, drug addiction.
Yes.
Number two, increase in the violent crime.
Yeah.
Does Palestine government has a policy in place to curb these problems?
Well, we just announced one a few days ago, and it's a three-pronged approach. We're going to focus on education, treatment, and enforcement. Right? We know education, we start at a young age and then educate children on the dangers of drugs. I mean, methamphetamine is a very dangerous drug. I don't think anyone would disagree with that. Treatment, we've already introduced some treatment facilities, RAM clinics, if you're familiar with them. We've been investing in them in this last year of our term here. And
so they're dedicated de-addiction centers?
They're called, RAM clinics, right? So yes, and we've opened a number of them throughout this past year. And in addition to that, we're going to be investing in more treatment facilities and more treatment and going forward. So treating the addicts, enforcement, of course, against the drug dealers, and educating our children not to get into this in the first place. I think drugs have certainly gotten a lot worse, or certainly the addiction to methamphetamine is a terrible,
very deadly,
and we know that, and we take it very seriously.
So eventually, a lot of times the drug abusers, they turn into violent criminals.
Yeah.
That's also just adding to the problem of violent crime that's been on rise within Manitoba. So do you have any policy for the violent crime that's been happening all around? Is there any increase in the police force that you will be looking into, or some other quasi-police units that you'll be setting up?
Well, I mean, policing for the most part is a city, of course, the city of Winnipeg has the Winnipeg Police Service. But what we're doing is we've opposed, and there's been in...
there could be some quasi-police units or something could be set up on the provincial level, maybe.
Right. Well, I mean, first of all, I know we've had our opponents have talked about safe injection sites, and we don't want to go that route. We don't believe there's such thing as a safe injection site. No amount of meth is safe. So we don't want that in our communities. We think that's dangerous, and we don't think that it helps giving addicts more deadly drugs. That's just very dangerous, and unfortunately our opponents believe that, and we don't. Like I said, on the enforcement side, we are looking at increasing our enforcement and having better intelligence going forward, like intelligence sharing amongst different departments going forward. We know that that's important, and that's going to be key to addressing it. It's a holistic approach, right? I mean, you can't just attack one side of the equation, and that's why we believe that the three-pronged approach that we've introduced will be very effective in addressing this unfortunate problem.
Do you think federal government's legalizing marijuana and the Cannabis Act and stuff has added to this problem?
Well, I mean, certainly we've had concerns about how the implementation of the cannabis was handled. Of course, you know that the federal government has jurisdiction over that, so we can't really control it. All we did is run the distribution side of things, right? The Manitoba government just decided to go and implement how it's going to be distributed to its customers, and the federal government was the one who decided, and it was the Trudeau Liberals who introduced this marijuana legalization or cannabis legalization.
So do you think it's just increasing this drug problem, or is it conducive with the society that's going on?
Well, you know, I mean, it's hard to say. I would let the experts, law enforcement experts might have a better opinion on that than I would, but I would say that we do take any drug addiction seriously, no matter what the drug is, but our primary focus right now, of course, is, and our primary concern is methamphetamine. There's no question that's a burning issue.
Okay. So there's been this Manitoba Provincial nominee program that's been going on for quite some time, and it's helping new immigrants come to
It's been a great program.
Yeah. But off late, it is said that it's just lying redundant because there's a lot of complexities that have been introduced into this program. Of course, a lot of it is through federal government because it's a federal subject. But then again, Manitoba also has a say in the Manitoba Provincial nominee program. Are you going to relax it a little bit on your end before it goes to the federal part, your federal counterparts for adjudication?
Well, I mean, we're very proud of our provincial nominee program. It was introduced by Gary Filmon back in the 90s, so a progressive conservative government introduced it then, and we want to see it continue to prosper. I mean, it's brought some 100,000 people to the province of Manitoba. I think it's a great program. We're going to continue it. We're going to, if there's any adjustments needed, I guess that's a conversation we have at a later point, but at this point, I mean, I think it's a great program. We've reduced the waiting list on it, and we've gone through, and we're looking to bring people, you know, we said Manitoba was open for business, and that means open for business to people from around the world, doesn't matter what country, to come here and contribute. That's what we want.
Okay, let's come down from the province to your constituency.
Okay.
So you do door-to-door knocking every day.
Absolutely.
It's a full-time chore, right?
Yeah.
And what all problems do you hear from the constituents, the local ones?
Well, the questions that come up at the door are numerous, and of course we always talk about the safety issue and crime and that, and you know, a lot of people are happy to hear about our new approach to crime, our action plan that will, I think, address a lot of the issues that are going on. People have questions about healthcare, and you know, I'm very happy to explain it and say, look, this is what's happening, and a lot of people say, well, you know, that doesn't make sense, right? The consolidation of services makes sense. You know, it just simplifies the process. It simplifies the whole system.
It's always just to put up your point of view as to the things, because every candidate that does the door knocking tries to put in his insight into the constituent's mind. So everybody has a right, and it's the perfect opportunity to do door-to-door knocking and talk to them face to face and clear your stance on certain things.
Right. Well, exactly, and I enjoy it. I go out twice a day door knocking, and I get more than my 10,000 steps a day, so I'm a healthy man.
You're getting leaner, eh?
I know. I think my jacket's too big for me now.
Don't go leaner and meaner.
Oh, no, never meaner. But lean's never a bad thing, right?
Of course it's not. Of course it's not, unless it's budget.
Well, hey, no, we're always working on that.
Alrighty. Thank you so much for coming
Great,
in and
well-
giving us a little bit of time of your busy schedule.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for
And thank you
appreciate
for
it.
letting
Really do.
people know about your stance on a
Yes.
lot of things that's been
Great.
going on around.
Well, thank you so much. Great interview. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for coming. ਅੱਜ ਅਸੀਂ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਸੀ ਐਂਡਰੂ ਸਮਿਥ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਨੇ ਪੀਸੀ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਦੇ ਉਮੀਦਵਾਰ ਲੈਜੀਮੋਡੀਏ ਕਨਸਟੀਟੂਐਂਸੀ ਤੋਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਸ ਸਿਲਸਿਲੇ ਨੂੰ ਹੋਰ ਵਧਾਵਾਂਗੇ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ ਹੋਰ ਵੀ ਬਹੁਤ ਸਾਰੇ ਕੈਂਡੀਡੇਟਸ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਅੱਜ ਦੇ ਲਈ ਆਪਣੇ ਹੋਸਟ ਜਸਬੀਰ ਭੋਗਲ ਨੂੰ ਦਿਓ ਇਜਾਜ਼ਤ ਸਤਿ ਸ਼੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ